Please stand up. Oh, okay. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Mr. Lunsford is on his way and will be here momentarily. Kathy, roll call, please.
Okay. Carol? Here. Marks? Present. Langston? I'm here. Simmons?
I am here. And a form is present. Mr. Freitas is walking in. Please note that. Next item on the agenda, audience comments. Do we have a sheet out?
If you like to see, you do the sheet out and see if anybody signed it.
Any audience member who wants to make a comment on any item not on the agenda, please sign in on that sheet.
No.
Handicap?
No.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, an update on Parker construction. Mr. Gosker?
Yes.
Is it okay?
Mr. Guy, please.
Will you stand?
You can sit.
I did provide, and you should have received a 2.5-page memo, kind of gave you to me, there are highlights to do. I hope that you find them interesting. But we continue to move. I've been updating the schedule, and quite frankly, right now, I've said we're doing pretty good. I think we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. When I say a little bit ahead of schedule, it's not like 2 or 3 weeks. It's more like maybe 5 or 6 days. The storage building, actually, if you drive by, it looks like a storage building, even though the roof structure's not there. We are doing the final bits of excavation on the interior load-bearing walls, and that is we're continuing to struggle with poor soils. We put drilled piers where we thought we had the worst case conditions, and we're still finding 24, 30 inches below the bottom and putting a thin layer of topsoil. Apparently, they're not removed when they fill on top. So we're having to go through that. There will be a change, and it'll be an increase in cost, but not an increase in contract value. It'll be used against the contingency. And on that note, we just wrapped up contract 5A, which was the site lighting and all that. And we recaptured $13,720 in allowances. So there are pluses and there are minuses, but that's the final change order for that contract. And we closed out contract 3A, which was all the underground plumbing, and that ended up with a $467.85 add. So at this point in time, we're still, big picture, we're still ahead of the game, and we anticipate at the end of the project being ahead of the game and having some money come back from all contracts. Last week on Thursday, we relocated the construction limit fence. The staff at Parker Junior High School convinced us they didn't have enough parking. So we moved it to the west, and we opened up approximately 30 to 35 parking stalls in the new area. Next summer, that will have its final course of asphalt. So right now, it's the base course. The district striped the stalls as they will ultimately be. They'll get covered up, but at least we're defining where the staff ought to be parking instead of assuming that they don't want to get a door neck and taking up more space than they ought to. Structural steel for the bar joist roof deck should be on site early next week, probably late this week for the storage building. The RTU and rooftop unit, and we should be roofing that area, I would say, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I was just talking with Scott and said we could possibly turn that over to you earlier than we anticipated. On the other hand, we haven't, and you haven't gotten together to select the kind of storage sub you want. And I really don't want you to move in and have to move stuff, so we can put some that kind of fixtures in. So, but we are going to be working on that and working with Scott on the selection for that product. it's a nominal amount, maybe just seek proposals for it. Give them a standard and seek proposals as long as it's probably under $25,000. I know we could go higher than that, but kind of that way. Right now, everybody's working very diligently. We've lost some time from under it, but and collectively, I don't think it's hurt us yet. And we're keeping on them and trying to keep them focused. I keep asking why the Mason doesn't have a larger crew. I haven't gotten a good answer yet. But, we'll be working on that probably the next week or so. Get the interior footage done, and we ought to be able to really move on.
Just,
Questions?
yeah, one question. That change order, that's about $23,000.
It's in that, right, rate cost, yeah.
So I want the board to know, we just found out about that today, actually how much that would cost. I will have to bring that to the board
Right.
meeting at our next, for approval, because it's over $10,000. Are there any questions right now on it? I will bring it ahead for recommendation for approval. It does not change the contract amount, it's in the contingency, but it needs to be done. Okay.
Any other general questions for the board? Okay, thank you very much.
Do you find this at least informational?
It's helpful.
Maybe not
It's helpful.
interesting.
No, it's
Okay.
interesting. It's helpful. It's helpful.
Good. Thank you.
Next item is a discussion of strategic plan from 15 to 20. Mr. Duster.
Yes, thank you. I'm bringing this to the board right now as we begin to plan for our next strategic plan. It'll be the district's second strategic plan. The first one will be completed, or the duration will be completed actually by the end of May, we hope, or June. And what I am suggesting to the board, last time, as you remember, if we went through the process, those that were here, and even if you weren't on the board, I know there's some people on the board now that are community members that participated with that. And I think it would be a good idea at this point to bring in outside eyes to go through this process with us, to help us to guide. And what I want to ask the board now, if you would like to do that to help us through the process. It is difficult to find someone who is really good at this. We have two organizations that would assist. One is Robert Madonia. He's been through this process quite a few times. He used to be the former superintendent of Frankfurt 157C. He's been retired out of there for a few years, and he has been doing this. In addition, I've brought you some information from the CEC. The CEC does a lot of these, and it really fits the way we're going. They know a lot about our district as far as tying information in. But those are the two. We can continue to look for a few other ones, but these are the two bits of information that you can read about and discuss. And what we can do, if it's okay with the Board of Education, we can start going out to get some quotes and bring that ahead. I would imagine that we want to start this process probably end of March, first part of April. So I bring that forth for discussion on what you want to do. We can do it ourselves like we did it before. It's an awful lot of work to do that. And I think we're so close to it, outside eyes may help for this one.
Good question?
Yes.
Okay. So what is the cost range? Do we have any idea what these type of substances?
We don't know that yet. I'm just bringing the concept forward.
Okay.
I can bring more information back. I just want to know what the board feels at this point about moving ahead. We still have plenty of time. That's why I'm hitting this fairly early.
How much work is it? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
There's just a follow-up there. Has the ISB, they make recommendations on organization? I'm assuming it's obviously it's the ISB, that they would have other recommendations or?
IASB? Yeah.
IASB.
Yeah. We can contact them. That's another avenue.
Is there a general pro or con for either group? I mean,
There's more experience with the CEC.
okay, so like Christine and John, did you guys have any like impressions of the last cycle working with the CEC?
We did the strategic plan in-house.
We did, oh,
I think it's probably the consensus of the board that wants some outside help. or at least we ought to consider what the costs are gonna be, so I'd suggest you consider adding one more to the mix. Bring 3 quotes, and maybe we invite, depending on what the quotes come back as, two of the 3 to present in person, 10, 15-minute presentation, and then the board can help make a decision from there.
This is really rest on the board for the strategic plan. I like your idea. Would you like a full board, a committee of the whole for presentations, or would you like to form just a little ad hoc committee of 3 people or 4 people and bring a recommendation? It's up to the board on what you'd like to do.
I have a thought that that this is something that impacts us all, and a committee of the whole might bring better questions because we often look from different places on this, and strategic planning can range from like 700 to 50,000. So that's I don't know about education where this hat lies, and I think it's a great idea to have outside eyes in something like this, but I think it would be better served with everyone.
I'd support committee of the whole. We can move more quickly.
I'd also like you to bring an idea to us of how we would do it if we were to do it in-house. So bring in your outside people and how many phone calls, but also kind of formulate a plan of what it would look like if we decide to do it in-house.
Do you remember the last process? I mean, I'll just pull out the last
Yeah, if we're going to do
process.
exactly that, do you have any ideas about changing that, any way of making that better? That's fine, but if you're saying you just want to, if we would do it in-house, we'll just copy the process last time to remind those that weren't here what that looked like.
And Kurt, just this would be just more for my education, not being on this before. John said it would be with the board to have an outside person. I think outside is great, but is there a particular reason why besides it taking up a lot of time? Was there something else that you'd like to get to with an outside?
Sometimes when you interview, like we did for the district analysis, people are more willing to tell a stranger.
Okay, I was just making sure if there was, my mind is there.
Yeah, that's about it. Plus, they're experts on it, and making strategic plans, but we're not. I mean, we could do it, but they have to really give us a good look at it. Okay, so what I will do is, at our next meeting, I'll bring some information in regard to dollars, and I'll try to find 3. And we're looking at a presentation, maybe October cow, maybe November cow. We'll bring them all in at one time, and we will have that information. Also, I'll kind of go over the process of what we did last time, and if there's any areas of improvement for that. So, thank you very much.
Good. Triple checking, we have a November cow with Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Is it the Monday after Thanksgiving?
I believe it's the Monday after the Troy conference.
Okay. Let's make
Yeah,
sure it's November at the latest.
Okay. Yeah, it's November, that Monday, 24th.
Yeah, if we can get a direction there, then we'll be able to hit the ground running, whichever direction we choose in the spring.
Okay. Is that the 17th?
No, 24.
24th. Okay, thank you.
We just finished with the strategic plan.
So next on the agenda is the Superintendent Evaluation Tool. We had a board committee, subcommittee, work on this project that was led by Ms. Harrell. Mrs. Harrell, would you
Okay.
report?
I gave you each handouts, so to give you an idea. So what I'd like to do is just go through a summary of our approach, and then put in front of you what our recommendation looks like. So we were charged to recommend a superintendent evaluation tool that was chosen from the 6 IASB. Okay, recommended evaluation tools. Committee, Lisa Harrell, Steve Paredes, and Leah Lang. What we did was review the individual tools, then I met with the superintendent on 9/17 for his input and recommendations. as this is supposed to be a collaborative process. Then we met with the committee on 9/19 in an open session meeting to review the tools and then share input for the superintendent and determine the recommendations. I then took the input from the committee, from Craig, and then just from the tools itself, and then put together a couple of documents that reflect what our recommendation will be. Some of the considerations that came out in our conversations were, one, that the tool is intended as a dialogue tool, a formal dialogue tool between the board and the superintendent to assess performance against the prior year based upon goals and standards. That this is not a gotcha moment and should not be used for at any time for that. It is transparent and it's an intent, and the accountability of the tools for evaluations and comments that are signed by board members. So there's not anonymous comments given or anonymous ratings, but that this is a very open conversation. That there are two parts to the evaluation. So we're being very transparent and simple. The first is, what did you accomplish based upon measurable results in line with the strategic plan and then the annual goals. And then how did you perform, which is based upon recognized performance standards, and we'll look at those as well. That this is an annual tool. So as we're reviewing the superintendent, it is based upon that year's performance. That we have a transparent rating system, a scale, excuse me, that the tool provides an opportunity for the superintendent to provide evidence of his accomplishments. It is an opportunity for the superintendent to also provide self-assessment. It's important that we have the provide opportunity for comments by section and then overall. And then finally, that there is an opportunity to provide a summary of the assessment for ease of conversation and just kind of going forward. The last, number 12, it's not clear because I didn't copy it down right. One of the considerations that we also looked at was the teacher evaluation scale to see, make sure if we're aligning or not aligning, or why or why not. So that was just what their scale is now, and you see some of it in there, but a little bit different for the superintendent. Okay. Some of the things not considered. There was actually only one. There's a previous assessment tool that was brought up that was used for prior superintendents. However, this was not presented to the committee prior to the recommendation being established, so it was not taken into consideration at all when we did the evaluation recommendation. The final recommendation, as no one tool provided for all the considerations that were listed above, the committee recommends a combination of S4 and S5. You'll see that most of the evaluation tools kind of do the same thing. You've got a rating, some of them provide for comments, some of them don't, but we kind of put those two together. And this recommendation is subject to modification by the board, and also the inclusion of specific goals, because you'll see these are samples. So what I'd like to do is take you to the second document, please. The second document is the actual superintendent evaluation form. The first page just gives you an idea of what it is, which is an evaluation of against district goals and the performance standards. And then the directions. The reason I kind of like these conversations we had is it starts with the superintendent and it ends with the superintendent. So the superintendent has an opportunity to provide a self-assessment, give evidence, because this is a tool to help that conversation. And then in the end, superintendent has the opportunity to provide a response to whatever the evaluations might be. So again, closing the loop that way. During the process, you would have a self-assessment by the superintendent, providing that evidence, and then the board would complete the evaluation, providing numerical and the supportive commentary. The board president would then consolidate all of the information into one document just for review with the superintendent and walk through it with him. The superintendent would provide any response or commentary, and then the board would meet with the superintendent to go through the evaluation in a formal way to have that really meaningful dialogue. And then the final evaluation just goes to file. Okay. The rating scale is there as well. Actually, when I met with Craig, what we talked about initially was a 4-point scale, and it was the excellent, proficient, meets expectations, and below expectations. Further comments with the committee, and we kind of thought through things, is that somebody may want to rate like something like, not quite meeting below, but it's not like horrible. So they felt that there needed to be one other level to say this is unacceptable, so a below rating didn't look like a penalty, but more of a conversation piece. So we ended up on a 5-point scale. Understanding that some people have an issue with somewhat of a 5-point scale because people can get lazy and just go right to the middle. But we're assuming that we're professionals that want to make sure the conversations are happening. So the excellent, proficient, meets expectations, which is a 3, which is you're doing your job, below expectations, and unacceptable. Turn to the second page. I can walk through these quickly. What we felt was very important is that after a rating, that the rating is important, but it should not be the primary point of this tool, because it's about a conversation. So this gives an opportunity to put the goal in, the superintendent provides their evidence, and the board member gets to comment on why they rated after each indicator. based upon a recommendation from our ISB rep. Okay, and then also in many of these examples, they say, you've got a whole bunch of stuff here, you really should be looking at the top 3 or 4, because you can't really look at everything. So you'll see that there's room for 4. Talk about that, but there you go. It's top 4. So if you keep going back, I think on page 4, keep going, that is the second part. And if the categories that are used, we have to walk through all of this because you'll see them. Is the leadership and district culture, and there are also indicators for that. Policy and governance. On page 6, community and communications and community relations. 7, organizational management. 8, yes, curriculum planning and development. And then, I'm just totally wrong here. Curriculum planning and development on page 10 is instructional leadership. 11 is human resource leadership. 12 is values and ethics of leadership. And then the last one is labor relations. What I took away from going through this is the superintendent has a big job. There's a lot of things that their expectations of this role, but the CEO of a large place, and this is the expectation. So that's the tool itself. But so how does the conversation start? Because it's a lot to work through and it can get very messy. The second piece, or the third piece of the document that you have in front of you is actually the summary form. You can open it up and start there. What this does is give Greg an opportunity to summarize. So, okay, how many of the 8 people that are, the 7 that recommended gave them an excellent or proficient, and then after they go through each area, on the very last page, it's a very clean document that says what was the rating for both goals and then standards, and then an opportunity to provide overall comments. Craig and I talked about the formula for that. I didn't bring that with me, so I'll have to present that back. But it's a standard formula where you're going through how many people did it, what the ratings are, what's the possible number, and what the percentage that comes. So that is output from our committee. It is a recommendation subject to a lot of conversation on what you want to do with this. But as we move through this, the year is going quickly, and if we're using this as a tool during the review time, which is in June, right? We need to
be before that this year.
Before the cycle completes.
Let's complete the cycle. Okay, well, it's important because obviously the conversations are going to be what we're putting in here. It's important that these things are done early. Ideally before the year starts. That's not a death sign that it did happen, but it's still early enough that we really need to have conversations about where this is going. So that's a overview of that.
Any questions?
Lisa and I just received this tonight. Lisa and I are going to meet to talk about a couple things. I just want to go through it and take a look at what we discussed, and then we'll have one more meeting about this we discussed this evening. And then I can let you know if I have any revisions or that. But it looks pretty good.
So when we had our board retreat, the recommendation from our ISB rep was that we go to an evaluation tool. So we have one in place. The next step would be for us to meet with the ISB rep as a follow-up now that we've selected a tool. When we select a tool, for them to train us on how to use the tool. And that will be us filling in the goals for the tools, and so there will be no surprises when the spring rolls around as to how it will be used and what will be evaluated and what will be measured and how it will be measured.
Do we have to approve the tool? We haven't approved it, is that correct?
Well,
We have to approve it in a committee,
Yeah.
board meeting, right?
Right. So
Thank you.
Craig and I, I'm going to see if I'm on the calendar. I don't know if you're Craig's.
Yeah. We'll find out.
We'll find some time. Okay. But we'll do our part quickly so that we can move to a board meeting, the next board, the board meeting.
We approve this at our level before we meet with ISB?
I think we should approve it, that way they will know what document we're using and that they can prepare for that meeting. So we should tell them what we're going to use.
Okay.
All right, tell me a little bit more about the goals on that, because there's already goals attached.
Well, for this year, because we've already set your goals, we will use those goals, we'll just place those goals in the tool. Okay, going forward, as goals are reset, and we'll have those discussions, set those goals, and use the tools to use the tool to evaluate the goals.
should I, try to meet with, Robert Tony, prior to, so I'm meeting with Craig, should I meet with Robert Tony just to kind of share this with her and say this is what's going on, so if there's any tweaks or anything, or any.
Well, if you have questions, if you like to, you can, you don't have to.
Okay.
But if you like to, that gives you more comfort, you can.
Cool.
I'm trying to get a meeting with her. It seems like none of the dates they're working out. So we'll try again. We got some other dates. I will be sending other dates out to the board. So hopefully everybody can be there.
One last comment though, from my standpoint, just, chairing both committees and things, I really appreciated the candor and the transparency with everyone I talked to from our conversation with Craig and then with the committee, and just, it felt collaborative. It felt like, okay, this is something we're gonna get done. I may not agree with you, I may agree with you this time, but there were questions that were brought forward. There was apprehension that was brought forward that, when you don't get it out, you can't fix it, can't figure it out. So I just want to commend the board on this, through this process. I appreciate it.
Thank you. If nothing else, we'll move forward. Next up on the agenda is ISAT data presentation. Dr. Ward.
So the final ISAT was given in March, of 2014. So this will be our last ISAT report that is given to the board. And before the final numbers were given, I wanted to go through and give you a review of the changes that were made to ISAT to give everyone an opportunity to understand what happened in 2013 and then changes to 2014. So it started in 2012 when the cut scores for meet and exceed used to be 191 to 329. That's what the students had to get in 2012 in order to meet and exceed. And then in 2013, they changed those cut scores to meet and exceed to 207 to 329. So what that meant is in 2012, a third grade student who had a 206 in reading met on the ISAT for meeting standards. That same child with a 206 in reading and 213 was below standards. So that was what was going on between 2012 and 2013. Those cut scores remained the same for 2014, but the changes for 2014 is that 100% of the ISAT was aligned to Common Core. In reading, what it mainly meant was the emphasis was on text-based evidence and really higher order thinking, really getting to that inference and analysis, really getting to the writing response, really trying to get to the demands of the higher comprehension and that vocabulary. Also in math, writing response, that's what I said, the vocabulary and the comprehension. In math, that explanation of the conceptual understanding. So really, really getting to that conceptual understanding and the tiered questions and conceptual tasks. So looking forward, Park is going to be getting to more of this. So ISAT attempted to do that in a paper pencil format. So looking at that, when we look at third grade for reading, meets and exceeds, for 2014, those are the scores. So we do our 3-year trends for that. For last year, we did not have our ELA units of study aligned to Common Core, but we still held pretty strong. For math, we did have our units of study aligned to Common Core. And so you can see the difference between the 2013 and 2014 testing with our ELA, or with our math units of study for that. For grade 4, for reading, the comparison for 13 to 14. So again, those cut scores did not change from 13 to 14 in 4th grade for math. 13 to 14. For 5th grade, for reading, grade reading. Sixth grade math. Seventh grade reading. Math. Eighth grade reading. And then eighth grade math. The metrics, as we look forward, what Park is expecting, it is not going to be the meets and exceeds. Park is going to be looking at the growth metric. So they haven't really given us, other than saying it is growth, to look for exactly what that metric is. So as we report out, when we talk about our math scores and when we look at that data, when we focus on the number of students growing, that is what we're going to be focusing on. And as Park rolls out, that's the metric that we will be using for that. So it will no longer be a meets and exceeds report. So what can we glean from the things that we sent? When we had our math units of study and put that in place, you can definitely see a difference between 13 and 14. So that is something that our teachers can be proud of, and you see in K through 5 the definite difference of that. If you think back to, we used to look at 4th and 5th grade and see the dip in 4th and 5th grade, and we were saying, what is that curricular problem? That has corrected itself with that. And so now we'll just keep moving forward and then look at what measures and metrics will come in with Park and look forward to that growth.
We don't know what the rest of the state has done because official scores have not been released yet.
Correct. We will.
We're going to have Dr. Graham come in November to give an explanation. Some of his preliminaries he has stated that we've shown more growth than some other school districts that we benchmarked.
So,
Just, I want to make sure that what I'm hearing correctly then is because of, I know the differentiation in what the higher scores you meets or exceeds from 12 to 13. So if I'm looking at, if I really want to go apples to see where our progress is, I should be looking at 13 to 14, right? Just 13 to 14 the scores? I'm trying to understand, like I'm looking at.
no. So things that we need to take into consideration, because last year, like when we were reporting out, so again, the preliminary data, we can't benchmark because I don't know how other districts did right now. So giving you this data, we are preliminary in the sense that I can't tell you other than talking to and picking up the phone and saying, you know, Homewood, how did you do on your scores? Did you stay pretty consistent? Did you go up or down? You know, other than that anecdotal information, that's all we know as far as how other districts did at this point in time because they have not been released.
We don't even know what the state average is yet.
Okay.
So in that AYP, we used to talk about AYP, the state received a waiver. And so because the state received the waiver, there is no more AYP. So we used to get AYP that really directed everything as far as to determine, are you a district who is in status or not in status? So because the state of Illinois received the waiver, all of that information is gone and we no longer even get AYP status reports.
Can I ask just a follow-up? Because so I'm making sure what I'm seeing here. So if you go to example, reading 4th grade. Okay, let's just wrap it. So if I'm looking at this with my naked eye, I'm going, okay, so Flossmoor Hill stayed about the same, 13 to 14. And actually, you know, Heather Hill went up a little bit. There was a dip with Sabrina and then Western Avenue, about the same, a little bit lower actually. So is this saying, okay, us putting in Common Core is really helping it? Is it saying same?
Units of study, we did not implement English language arts units of study for Common Core. Okay. That's why we need to focus as far as math. Our ELA units of study started this year.
So go to math, which
so
is the next one.
This is math.
Oh, so you put it already. So again, so I'm looking at, okay, so we're putting it exactly working a bit, or?
That's what, so if you look at 2013,
right,
it was 60, and 2014, we had 71.
Yes.
So in 2013, 44 to 62, 51 to 59, 73 to 80.
So that's what I was trying to say, so so I can look at that, that's what I feel like I'm looking at, and I'm
Yes.
telling the story, saying, what we're putting in place seems
Yes.
to be working.
Exactly. So with math, that's something that I do feel comfortable saying.
Got it.
Okay, so is that growth despite the jump in cut scores? Is that what I'm getting? So
Yes.
do we have a numerical score comparison that we can make from between 2012, 2013, and 2014?
The reason I go back to the cut scores and all of that, that is why we called in Clay Graham, because Clay, with his analytics, he basically put everything on an even point.
Right.
And so when he will come in with his data, then I can say, yes, we have that because he has actualized the scores.
Okay.
And that's why we want to use his data in making some of that comparison. Because he has taken out the, whatever formula he does, that is why we want to use the data that he does with the formulas that he puts together, because then we can compare and look at what that score is.
Okay. Go ahead.
So kind of what these numbers look like if they were based on a 2012 metric, or
Correct.
what 2012 would have looked like
Correct.
had it been, that's what.
Correct, and so these are the state's percentages that they give us, and so that's why we are working with Dr. Graham, because we wanted the pure data as far as to take out all of the,
Here's a baseline.
exactly.
And the 2013 ISAT was what percent?
Concord
30?
last
That was
year,
30? I thought it was 30.
I think it was 30% Concord last year, and then 2014 was 100.
Okay, so then, Mike, I'm sorry, Mr. Briggs, are you finished? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask a follow-up question. So just to remind us all, when were these tests taken?
March.
March, okay. So do we have any useful information in terms of teachers in classrooms where they can say, okay, we need to work on this discrete set of skills with our students in the next 6 months?
We don't use ISAT data for
Right.
that. We use NWA map, and then we use our local data.
Right.
And so that's why I'm just going to kind of segue to some of the information that we are going to use for school improvement planning, because we're not going to use this data
Okay.
because it has no relevance to us. It
Right.
does not mean anything for our school improvement plans because ISAT is gone and PARC is coming in. So we will not be using ISAT to benchmark, which is also why we've really paid a lot of attention to NWA map and why we've really paid attention to the growth component of NWA and why we've really been looking at benchmarking our pre and post unit assessment and the formative assessment that we have in here, because we needed consistent data that our teachers can use to tell us how our kids are doing and how our teachers can really work with our unit assessments and say, what do our kids know based on the standards? What do they need to know? What do I need to teach them sitting in front of me? So we will not be using ISAT data in our school improvement plans, and we will not be benchmarking to PARC because they have not given us any metrics to benchmark to. So you will not see any ISAT data in our school improvement plans, and you will not see us benchmarking to PARC.
Okay. Does this, okay, that's all I have.
Just in terms of a timeline, with reading, you said we started that this year.
Correct.
Math, we started that last year.
Mm-hmm.
All grades?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. It's just interesting that it's just all over, from grade to grade, from subject to subject. There's no consistency. It's very all over the place. It's like in some areas, a particular school or a particular grade will have shown growth, whatever that looks like, or an increase in percentage of a certain number, but there's no correlation to that grade in another subject. And in some areas, they grew in reading, which we just started this year, and the math was the same. It's just so odd that the numbers are all over the place from grade to grade, from reading to math. There's no.
So there's an opportunity for growth here. Can you explain to us what the plan is?
Exactly.
Why it makes sense?
So what we do is that's why our units of study are really good and why we have the conversations and why our school improvement plans and when the principals get up here, why we like to tie the two presentations together, because it's really important when you are looking at school improvement and why that school improvement planning comes into place. So if it's okay, can I segue to the next presentation? Because I think unless anyone has any questions on this data, the two really do tie together because it kind of gets to that next portion of what we're going to do.
Go ahead.
Is
Just
that
when
okay?
you're done.
Okay.
Do you have cohort data?
Yes, so the cohort data.
Will that come out in November in terms of part of grant analysis?
So the two ways that we can look at cohort data is to look at the data that we have on the slides from where they were in the previous year. So we have to probably change the information on this slide. So Floss Marville's fourth grade this year was third grade last year, and we could look at that cohort data that way to see how they did in third grade to fourth grade and look at the cohort data that way. So that is the one way that we could look at that. But we do look at that cohort data, and more specifically, it gets to the school improvement plan, because the way that that cohort data is looked at specifically gets to when the buildings and the teams look at that cohort data comes out, because in order for each grade level to make the action plans that they need to make, so for example, the Serena Hills third grade team needs to look at how the students did in second grade in order to set their goals and action plans for third grade, because you need to know how those students performed in second grade at the end of that second grade year to even look at and develop their action plan for that third grade year. So that's where that cohort data becomes very important at that time. So you look at that data of that cohort in the previous year to help set that goal and action plan at that grade level data. So there is strong alignment then, and looking at that cohort data to really see where were those kids performing, where do we think we can take them. So that alignment is there, and we look at that cohort data, which we'll get to as far as how important it is when we are developing the school improvement plans. So I'll address that, and the principals will even probably take that one step further as well. So with the school improvement plans, what we do is we have a data retreat. We have 2 data retreats that our teams look and work with. So all of the building leadership teams, we come together in June because we do use the school improvement cycle and a year-round process of school improvement planning. Our teachers come in June and look at the data that they review after our students take all of the testing that we have in May, and they start to make all of the action plans, review that data in June, and then come together again in August, look at the data and any additional information that we have in August, come back together in August. We do the SMART goal format, which specific, strategic, measurable, attainable, reliable, and time-bound. We look for fewer goals because that we know fewer goals make the difference. You cannot focus on a lot of things. You need to focus on fewer things in order to make the difference. This is something that is very unique to our district. We have the 3 monitoring and report out periods where all 5 of the buildings come to the district office and they look at their data 3 times a year and come to the district office and report out on that data 3 times a year. So this is a living and breathing document. It is not stagnant. It is not this thick, goes on your shelf and stays on your shelf. This is something that the grade level teams are doing, that the teachers are doing, that the students are doing. Teachers are talking to students. Teachers are talking to their buildings. This is something that is happening. So this is something that we know that highly effective schools do. When you look at the data, when you look at this, so this is things that we know are occurring on a regular basis. We know that the children know their math grit. We know that the children know their goal, their target area, their strengths. These are things that highly effective schools do. So this is how we know that what we're doing will be effective and will be working. We do have coaching that is occurring for teachers and for students, not only with instructional coaches that we have within our district, but we also still have the partnership with the SMART organization, and we have a principal and an assistant principal, as well as our teacher leadership teams going through that training to really make sure, how do I use that data in my classroom, and how do I work with that data? And then we make sure that the grade levels do have goals directly aligned to that building school improvement plan. So again, the SMART goals focus on the few things that have the greatest impact. So we're not trying to encompass everything that we're doing, we're focusing on few, because we know that they can move. So again, we want to focus on the areas of the greatest need. We're looking for that greatest area of need. We make sure that there are short-term and long-term goals so that schools can see the results quickly and continuously. So the district sets that long-term goal. As a district, last year, we set a goal that we wanted to be achieved by the 2017-2018 school year. We gave the buildings 5 years to attain that goal, and they had to figure out what those short incremental steps would be to get to that long-term goal. We were really looking for that alignment so that all of those SMART goals link to that district strategic plan. So that strategic plan is very critical in the work that we do with the buildings. So it gets to the classrooms, and it really aligns the personal and professional efforts. And it really is that results-oriented, focusing on improving the student learning, because it is about the learning. It is not about the teaching. It is about the learning that the kids are doing in the classroom. We need to make sure that the evidence is observable, that the goals are being achieved, that the skills and knowledge or performance that is comprised or led to proficiency in whatever that greatest area of need is. As far as the tools that are used to monitor the progress, and that the measures are specific to the indicators. So again, we're looking for that alignment, making sure that the tool and the measures are specific. The targets, again, are short-term incremental steps towards the goal, and that there are targets for each measure. Based on the data, what is attainable? Can they achieve that data? So getting back to that cohort, you really need to look at what they were doing previously, because you don't want to set the goal too high. The other benefit of this is that it is that living and breathing document, and you can adjust. If you have set the goal by the winter benchmark and they've met it, you just don't want to say, oh, they've met it. You want to set the goal higher. And so that is the other benefit of having this year-round process, because you then can set that goal higher so that you are continually having them strive and achieve for something higher. And then based on research, we need to make sure that we are rooted in the research and keep going back and making sure, what is the research telling us? Is it attainable? So we don't want to set something and say, oh, we can make a 20% gain, when we really only know, research tells us that maybe they can only make a 1.5 or 2.5 years growth based on some of the interventions that we purchased. What is that standard makeup growth or catch-up growth? And use that to help us make those targets. So when we look at how is this being done, what we do is we really determine, these things are posted on the website. So we know that all of our building plans, that all of the principals have this, that it's posted for anyone to view. All of the grade levels, develop plans aligned to the school improvement plans, that then they monitor this through their PLC time, they work on this, that then, based on that document, the teachers take that back into the classrooms. So the building has a school improvement plan, the grade level has an action plan, the classroom, the teachers then take that back to their classroom, and then again work with the students. So there is all of that alignment. So we want to make sure that all of this is done, that schools share their targets, that each grade level team knows that target, that everyone is aligned to that school improvement plan. So again, that it gets to that classroom level, to the students, that the action plans are aligned to the school-wide strategies, that are aligned to the SMART goals, that are then aligned to the district. So we're really looking at all of that continuation and the alignment. So as far as the strategies, we need to make sure that they are high-yield strategies to help ensure that we accomplish the goals that we set forth, that they're specific, clearly stated, describe how we intend that the action will positively impact the goal, that they reflect best practices based on research, that they're realistic, that the school staff implementing them, that there's time given and resources available to the teachers. Again, high yield, focused, student-centered, data-driven, and measurable. School-wide strategy examples, implementation of the Common Core, our units of study, the ELA and math units of study. Use of short cycle predictive assessments in core content areas to monitor performance, the Plan, Do, Study, Act continuous improvement cycle, the use of our district initiatives, the Big Six, implementing the PLC, our professional learning communities, to engage staff in the work of the school improvement, to really talk about those unit of study. What are we doing with our ELA unit of study? How do we know the kids are learning? What do we do when they're not learning? What are we doing if they are learning? How are we advancing them? This again is the diagram. So you will see the SMART goal, what the district has set, or the 5-year indicator. There will be an indicator and a measure. So again, you are not going to see ISAT. You will not see PARC. You will only see our local, nationally normed MAP, Ames Web, and our benchmark tests, our local assessments here, because we do not have the ISAT to go to. We do not know what is measuring, so you will not see ISAT in any of the plans for this school year. And then you'll have the target. And I also want to indicate, because I know that this has come up, when you do see NWEA, and if you see 60%, if our students' growth is in the 60%, it means we are in the top 10% of the nation. If our children are achieving that 60% of growth, if they are achieving 70% of growth, we are in the top 1% of the nation. So if you see that growth measure. So this is an example of a reading indicator. So again, NWEA MAP, Ames Web, unit pre and post assessment. So we're really trying to get the schools to go to our local level, look at that data with zone analysis. Then again for math. And really learning conditions. This is something that we're really looking at with the Illinois 5 Essentials. And this year our challenge was with those learning conditions, getting it to the student level and really looking at student engagement. And when people think of student engagement, people are just thinking of kids being busy, but it is more than that. Are kids cognitively engaged in the task in front of them? What does that cognitive engagement look like? And so that is the challenge that not only our principals are giving, but our teachers are giving. What is cognitive engagement? How are kids cognitively engaged and involved in the task in front of them? So that's the conversation that our teachers are involved in during this school year. And then just once again, what does the Plan, Do, Study, Act continuous improvement cycle look like? What are our teachers involved in? Defining the issue, assessing it, analyzing it, working through it. So this is the Plan, Do, Study, Act. So with this preview, I would like to turn it over to the schools to present part of their school improvement plan, and we're going to start with Parker Junior High.
Good evening. Pleased to be here this evening. I just realized as I was sitting here, this is my 15th school improvement presentation. Wow. For the 161 Board of Education. As Dr. Bork indicated, the Parker Junior High School Improvement Plan is the result of work by the building leadership team at the 2 summer data retreats. In reviewing last year's school improvement plan, there are 3 areas of success that I would like to highlight for you this evening. And the first is around goal setting, and we really increased in this area last year what we were doing, and pleased to say that last year we involved all core area teachers. Previously it had been just the language arts or math, but this involved all core area teachers and all students last year. And I really think that that benefited our students in them having ownership in setting their goals, but also deepened the understanding of the data and the importance of the goal setting with the students for our staff members. In grades 6, 7, and 8, we exceeded the typical growth targets in reading. And then with regard to the DDI and using map data to drive our instruction and small group instruction, we moved beyond what I would call the awareness level and into emerging implementation. that at Parker Junior High. After thoughtful and reflective review of our practices and data, we developed the plan before you. Our goals and action plan are simpler than those in the past, yet they're very specific and targeted to the improvement that we desire. We identified a couple of areas of need, a few. One was, we talked about that typical growth, but in looking at our data, we realized that with those targets for college and career readiness, that if we just expected that typical growth each year, we were never going to close that gap and have our students ready. So we are reaching beyond that typical growth, and we are also moving, as you can see on the plan, from fall to spring measurement for growth, from spring to spring. That will be the first time for us this year, and it's going to stretch us, but it is so important that we reach those targets. Additionally, the need to increase cognitive demand and student engagement, Dr. Work also touched on this, and that will be evidenced in higher order thinking, higher order questioning, and student choice in their product and the complexity of the content that we're covering. In order to address these, we're going to be implementing the cooperative learning. Over the summer, our ELA teachers had 2 full days of Kagan training. It's for the cooperative learning. And then since the start of the school year, our math, social studies, and science teachers each had 1 day. And so that is underway at Parker Junior High. Also with the DOK, the depth of knowledge, with the questioning, the cognitive demand. And then in the area of math, our teachers will be working with zone analysis for the first time on our common assessments to look at growth and for instructional planning. Lastly, and just as importantly, is the culture and learning environment at Parker. It continues to be an area of focus, and of course our goal in this area is to ensure that all students are focused and achieving. And along with the Kagan, along with the DOK, we're going to continue with CHAMPS. We did quite a bit of that training last June, and we're going to continue with it this year. Are there any questions? All right. Thank you very much.
You mentioned things like Kagan, DLK, CHAMPS as tools, interventions. Could you explain what some of those are and why you think those are the appropriate things?
Certainly. With the Kagan, it's cooperative learning strategies where students, it increases student engagement because it has students working with partners, working in triads, working in groups of 4. It has them up and moving with the types of questions that are answered. It really is much more engaging than them just sitting at their desks for that. The CHAMPS is about expectations around behavior with PBIS, making those very clear in terms of expectations, and that we're dealing with it in a very positive way. If you were an open house, you probably saw on the walls of most of the classrooms, the teachers that were trained, the CHAMPS and what that looks like in each area. The DOK is depth of knowledge, and that's very similar if you're familiar with Bloom's, types of questions that our teachers are asking, and with regard to the assessments that the students are given and the products that they're creating, engaging them in higher order thinking.
I just need you to explain something to me in a little bit simpler language for me to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So on the slide that says Parker Junior High successes,
Mm-hmm.
it says all grade levels exceeded fall to spring growth targets in reading.
Mm-hmm.
But then I look at your goal and information analysis, and I see numbers that are not 100%. So am I not comparing the same? When we say all grade levels exceeded fall to spring growth targets in reading,
So
tell me what that means in simple language.
So 100%, so the target, so if we look at the tree metric, 100% is not necessarily the metric. The growth might have been, if we need to look at that, and I would need to have like the document in front of me, but it could be 100% of the targets. The target could have been 60 or 50% of the students. So that's where that is. So we're not looking for 100%,
Okay.
We're looking for the target. And if the target was set at let's just say 50%.
Okay.
And if they met that 50% of the target,
Okay.
that's
As
what
a grade level.
Okay.
Grade level.
bless you.
So,
Based on our goals from last year.
okay. All
Does
right.
that make sense?
It does, because I was comparing
Thinking
two
of
different
the-
things, and
yeah.
I'm thinking, oh, this doesn't look like 100%, but that's not the goal.
No, it's the target.
Right.
If they met the target.
Okay. Thank
Does
you.
that help?
Yes, that clarifies that.
And then the other thing that I wanted to say, just to further clarify, like what Mrs. Westerlund, like why we chose Kagan or why we chose DOK, the Common Core was asking, it's saying that they want students to talk, and 21st century learning skills is saying they want cooperation, they want collaboration, and so some of the research that we did and research-based strategies, they're represented with some of the things that are up on this board, and so we looked at research-based strategies for cooperation and for collaboration, and so that's why some of the cooperative learning strategies were chosen, is because we were looking at those research-based practices that were saying that these are things that have been research-based and do get kids to talk and do get kids to cooperate and fit into those 21st century learning skills that kids need to be successful in this day and age and fit into Common Core skills. So that's just one further clarification.
Anything else?
Okay, I believe Flossmoor Hills is up next, Mr. Braven.
Good evening. This is set up for tall people. I'm happy to share information about the Flossmoor Hills School Improvement Plan. As you can see from our first slide, we're celebrating the fact that in the area of math, all grade levels at Flossmoor Hills scored in the top 10th percentile across the nation for their math growth. Again, as Dr. Work said earlier, anything at the 60th percentile places you in the top 10% across the nation. In the area of reading, all grade levels made at least average growth, with kindergarten and fourth grade scoring above average. When we looked at our data, we decided that our greatest area of need, based on the data, in math would be getting the improvement that we wanted on our unit assessments. We want 70% of the students to achieve scores of 70% accuracy. In reading, we want to increase the math growth to get them to the 60th percentile. Again, the majority of the classes were at the 50, 58 percentile, with 2 of them going over the 60 percentile. In order to do this, we will continue to use the 90-minute math block and focus on Common Core standards, math centers, which are in every classroom, differentiated instruction, especially for our higher performing students. When we look at it, it's harder to move those higher performing students, and we as a school realize that that's something that we really need to push those students and stretch them so that we'll get them to move to their capacity as well. We also want to focus on our ISAT program. In ELA, we will work across the curriculum. That's something that we did a lot of with math last year. And we infused math into everything that we did, and we ended up saying that with our math scores, that really made a big difference. So we want to use those same strategies in ELA to make sure that we're working across the curriculum to push those students. We'll use the close read strategies, differentiate the instruction, and then use the curriculum maps in order to guide our instruction. We'll continue to use the information that we've learned from professional development, which includes Kagan, that Mrs. Westerlund already talked about, Kaplan-Dawson and the DDI materials, and then the Webb's depth of knowledge. And we're sure that if we do that in a systematic way, we'll be able to move our students forward to the level that they can all achieve to their highest potential. Any questions?
Is Kaplan-Dawson a new strategy this year?
No. We've had the DDI materials for about 4 years, I think.
2011.
And then we even switched, when Common Core switched, we switched over to DDI Common Core materials as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll have Heather Hill and Pat Pierce.
Good evening, members of the board, senior administrative team, and fellow stakeholders. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share our school improvement plan for Heather's School. I would like to begin by sharing some of our successes. I'm very pleased to share that at least 60% of the students in the following grades met their math growth targets, which reflect them being, again, in the 10 top % of the nation. Kindergarten really exceeded in math. As you can see, 100% of those students met their growth targets. Overall, the majority of our students met their growth targets or exceeded their growth targets. In third grade, they ended up in the average range. They were at 51%. So overall, 68% of our students met their growth targets in the area of reading, and 75% met their growth targets in the area of math. As a caveat, we do realize that it is imperative that we continue with this upward growth trend or this catch-up growth to ensure that all of our students are able to meet their benchmark grade level. Greatest area of need. Our greatest area of need in math and reading are as follows. In reading, we had 2, language and writing, our greatest area of needs. But by spring 2014-2015, at least 46% of our students will meet the ACT grade level benchmark scores to help them prepare for college and career readiness. In math, numbers and operation, and algebraic thinking are our greatest area of need. By spring 2014-2015 school year, 47% of our students will meet the ACT grade level benchmark score to help them prepare for college and career readiness in these areas. And how will we get there? Our action plan. In order to reach our goal, a summary of our strategies is as follows. In reading, compass learning will be used on our students to help our students in the area of their GAN. And students' personalized learning paths, teachers will incorporate guided reading, barn house methods, group students by target areas, engage students in close reads, use step up to writing, Kagan structures of learning, and increase daily independent reading time for all students. In math, compass learning will be used to focus on students' GAN. Instructional planner will be used to develop lesson plans for students and focus on individual and unit learning targets. Differentiated instruction will be provided using guided math, flexible reading, flexible groupings, intervention time, and our math digital curriculum. Title I math paraprofessionals will also provide target interventions for our students. Thank you for your attention, and are there any questions? Yes.
So your greatest area of need slide, it's like a big red flag for me. I'm trying to make sure I'm reading this correctly because I, read through the other scores, and they seem, for other schools, it seems that, 46 should make it. What are they now? And then even that 46 making it, that means, almost 60% are not achieving. So, you see, I'm just reading this plain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if I feel like Pisces, and I'm probably overdoing it, and I just needed to understand these 2 areas.
By the year 2017, 100% of our students will reach that goal. So we're trying to go in increments, small increments. Last year was a smaller increment of students who had reached that goal. This year we're trying to increase to get closer to average, which is 50%. By 2017, with the higher stakes, all of our students should be there, 100% of our students, but we have to go in small increments. It has to be attainable goals for our students to reach.
I guess what I'm asking is, relative to, our district and the performance in our district, can you kind of help me understand even why we're starting out so low at Heather Hill at the school, and maybe just different reasons, and I just don't understand that. If we have, a district that's pretty high performing areas, it just seems really low.
Because the stakes are so much higher for our students, we know that it will be unattainable for us to say 100% of our students will meet all of these benchmarks for these students with everything coming down on them. So we have to go in small increments. So starting where the students are now and looking at the scores from the past and their benchmark levels, we have to use that information, trend data, and see where students are and how they're performing on the benchmarks as they are right now. I know ISAT is no longer here, and we don't yet know what the benchmark will be for Park, but the benchmark where the students are as far as math scores, those students will go up increasingly until they can reach that 100% mark. Yes.
To answer your question, the students that are coming into Heather Hill, there's more than our other schools that aren't at the level that they need to be. So the teachers are working to help to grow them up.
I wasn't trying to browbeat you with a question. That was where I was trying to get to, which is why we're even that far. So if I'm hearing, do we have more individuals that have not gone through the school system in Flossmoor? So we have, I don't translate, that's bad word, individuals moving in who may be coming to us with lower skill. That's what I was really trying to
We
understand.
do have those students, but we try not to use that as an excuse. We try to make sure that we meet students where they are. And if students are below where they need to be, below grade level benchmarks, we have to meet them where they are and give them the tools that they need to help improve where they are. So this is the state we're in, and we have to meet students where they are.
So is this a call for additional resources? Because 2017 seems a long way away. I mean, is there anything to accelerate this process?
We have interventions in place now for them. We will take as much intervention as many interventions as we can. We have the Title I parapros. We have 2 of them now in math. If we could get reading parapros, we could get that too. But we have to use the tools that we have right now in order to help us increase where we are. And our building is the only one that has the special students with the special needs, you know, with those classes in our building. But again, we try not to use that as an excuse. We reach students where they are and help them move forward. Yes.
On the previous slide, where there's a blank after 3rd grade reading, it's, can you tell us a little bit about the discrepancy between kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and then, like, why is that missing, I guess?
Why is 3rd grade missing?
Yes.
Because it says that at least 60% of our students met in the top 10%.
Okay.
3rd grade was the only one that was not at the top 10%, but they were at the average.
Okay.
So they were at 51% to be exact.
Oh, okay. So can you tell us something about why there might be almost like an exception in that particular grade where everything else, aside from kindergarten, which looks pretty good, is roughly about the same? Is there something happened at some point, or?
The only thing that happened is the students, the grade level benchmarks or the targets that were set for those students, they simply did not meet them. There was an improvement over last year because in last year, 3rd grade didn't meet in reading or math, and there were other grade levels that didn't meet as well.
Okay.
But this year, 3rd grade did meet the top 10% as far as math, so they are improving. So again, we have to meet those students where they are, and teachers put the interventions in place where they can and help those students improve.
To answer your question, we've noted that through our continuous process. And what we're doing is we're adding additional interventions and assistance throughout the year to assist with that. So we identified that. And the baseline of 50%, it's still an increase from where they were.
Right.
These scores that you see up, these growth scores are really something to be proud of because they're quite lower the year before.
Right.
Any other questions from the board? I see one hand in the audience.
How do they construct the growth targets?
Each student has a growth target, a personalized growth target in the teacher's class. Typical growth for one student might be 17 points if they're lower performing students. For students who are at the top, their typical growth might be 3 points. If they're higher performing students because they're already so far advanced, their growth target might be 2 points, 5 points. But typical, maybe 6 to 7 points. So each student has to attain their growth target.
So if you'd like to go on the NWEA's website, they have about a 25-page document that really talks about the Rosh unit and the metrics that they use to determine that for each child. So
Right, but I don't have time for that, so maybe you can explain, do they go by percentiles? If you're in a certain percentile, they look at growth by percentile?
no, it's really individualized to each student because it is.
Which is a percentile?
So it's a very, I can't even, really it's a 25-page document and it's very detailed. And I could, if you want to give me your name and your address, I could search that document for you, print it off and get that for you, so. But it is highly complex. I remember I printed that out one time. I don't know if it was Mr. Simmons or Mr. Paredes asked for it, but that was something that I did for them, and it was very complex. The metrics that they went in to determine that Rosh unit for each child.
My guess is it's just a percentile, and then you're looking at a percentile growth. What the average kid has at each percentile ranking. And is that what it is, John? It's got to be something simple like that.
It's an algorithm that's based on the number of percentiles. I don't know what it is. I can't summarize.
Seems like we've been talking a lot about it, but we don't know what it is.
Because it was a
It's confusing.
complex,
It's too complex, but yet we're still using it too.
we are, because it's a
Even though
national
we don't know
norm
what it
test.
is.
So, but I'd be happy, if you'd like to make an appointment, I'd be more than happy to sit down and discuss it.
You can just send me the document. It's John List at the University of Chicago.
Sure.
Thank you, Mrs. Spears.
You're very welcome.
Good evening. At this time, I would like to share with the entire board highlights of the Serena Hills School Improvement Plan. First, our successes. In reading and math, in reading, our growth goal was 77%. Reading, end of the year result was 66%. There was a dip. We certainly saw some struggles in the second grade. So we are looking now at third grade to support that group of students with interventions and looking at their targets to certainly individualize areas of needs. The reading, again, we were the top 10% in the nation, so even though we took a dip, we are still in that percentile. In math, the growth goal was 77%. The end of the year result was 71%. And again, top 1%, as Dr. Work said, in the nation. Our greatest area of need, our GAN, for reading, based on the data, the greatest area of need, we will focus on foundational skills and informational text. By the end of the 2014-2015 school year, 77% of our students will meet or exceed their growth expectations on the math assessment. Secondly, our math GAN, to improve the math proficiency scores for all grade levels by increasing knowledge of operations and algebraic thinking. By the end of the 2014-2015 school year, 75% of our students will meet or exceed their growth expectations on the math assessment. How will we do this? Finally, our action plan. We will formulate data-driven decisions based on local and norm reference assessments. That's our common assessments, the math, Ames Web, and interventions. Utilize best practice strategies. We talked about some of these already, the DDI, the Barnhouse reading strategies, Peace Circles, which is a social emotional learning intervention, guided reading and math, and then again, learning in social emotional and the fine arts. We will integrate technology, including Odyssey, and provide interactive activities using digital tools to facilitate cognitive engagement. We'll get our learning out the door to a bigger audience. That's our goal. We will promote parental and guardian involvement through school-wide activities. We've been highly successful already with our PTO and doing some fundraisings, but certainly making our parents are part of the educational process that have been disenfranchised for some time. So we are bringing in a number of parents through our school doors, which is exciting. So in conclusion, our team at Serena Hills will embrace all stakeholders in our action plan efforts and look forward to a productive and successful year. A special thank you to the entire board and all of its members for your continued support. Any questions? Thank you. I'll turn this over to Dr. Prosen.
Good evening, Board of Education members. I'd like to follow a similar pattern as my colleagues and talk a little bit about the successes at Western Avenue. We really kind of focus, based on our last school improvement plan, on growth. All of our grade levels met and exceeded national norms in both reading and math on the spring 2015 assessment, spring 2014 assessment. School-wide, we obtained 13.4% school growth in reading and 15.1% growth school-wide. So that's taking a look at all those kids, taking a look and trying to see what their average growth was across the school. And just want to highlight one of our classes. Kindergarten had over 86% of students exceeding their math targets in reading and math, and one of those classes had 100% in reading and 96% in math. Our greatest area of needs, when we took a look at our data, once again, we wanted to take a look and see that all of our students at all ability levels were meeting that growth targets. We saw some data, especially our higher level students, we could push that percentage up a little bit higher. Total school-wide, we had 68% of our students achieving their growth targets in reading, and 68 was in math and 67% was in reading. We're going to continue to implement our ELA curriculum, as it just kind of stated that our ELA scores were a little bit lower than what our math scores. That was also reflected in the ISAT data, and so we want to continue to focus in on that area. And then we also want to see a continued progression of increase of growth through all grade levels. We would occasionally, in Western's data, we would see a little dip after third grade into fourth, and those percentages weren't as high, so we're going to continue to focus in on that. How are we going to do that? We've got a lot of similar strategies. There's a couple that I really want to highlight in our reading portion. First off, the use of essential questioning and digging deeper and engaging our students in dialogue that's not just going from teacher to student, but that's going and engaging from student to student to student and creating more of a dialogue classroom-wide. We also wanted to really engage in our use of differentiation beyond the teacher rotation schedule or station. When students really in that guided reading practice, we found that they were differentiating when they were with the teacher, but when they went out and they might do a read to self, or they might do a writing station, those assignments were not always differentiated. So we're looking to dig deeper and go and engage our students more. In our math, where we really want to focus in on, and this is aligned to the Common Core, we want to use that process dialogue within our instructional practices, talking to students more about how they're achieving the answers that they're getting, what processes they're using, comparing those processes to what other students are using within that. And then within both our math and our reading, we want to really focus in on our instructional planning tool. We feel that that's a very powerful tool that will open up collaboration, not just amongst grade levels, but also through vertical articulation as well amongst all our grade levels. Questions?
I have a question. So again, the same question I had with Mrs. Westerland. If you go back to your successes slide. Okay, so it says 13.4% growth school-wide. In layman's terms, what does that mean?
You add up all the growth of all our students, and what that is on average, our school averaged 13.4% growth. So where those growth targets are, usually they're setting a student to have 8 or 9 point growth. That's typical school-wide, what we would look at from where they're at in fall to spring. Typical student would have about 8 points, 9 point growth, and that varies depending on grade levels. School-wide, we're exceeding that, and our students are achieving 13.4% growth.
Does that fall into a natural percentage? Like, would you say that based on that, we're in the top 10% or growth? Or?
We were at, as I shared, we were 68% in math, or excuse me, in math, and 67% in reading. So in the 60th percentile, we're in the top 5%. Okay. Our school goal is to push that into the 70s and be in the top 1%.
Any questions? I have a general question, but not for Dr. Gross.
On behalf of all my colleagues, we just wanted to say thank you to the board allowing us to talk about our schools. It's a real pleasure and highlight for us to be able to brag about the wonderful work that's going on in our schools and where the direction that we're going. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Foreman. Thank you to all presenters.
Just a general statement, and I have said this every time we have these presentations. It would be very helpful if when we are presented the information, if we are presented consistent data from school to school. So if you look, for example, at, if you pull up one particular school improvement plan, their narrative, one school may focus on one thing, another school may focus on something else, but then as you move forward, it's all consistent. They have the same strategic goal, indicator, measure, target, but what they're highlighting in their narrative is different, and it makes it difficult when one presenter gets up and they talk about a percentage of growth, and then someone else gets up and they talk about it, their school using different numbers. It just would make it a lot simpler if it was consistent and we use the same comparisons.
So are you asking, because if it's based on the greatest area of need and based on what each school, because the whole purpose is for each school to determine what their greatest area of need is based on their data.
And I get that, but in one presentation, you're looking at the percent growth school-wide. And I know that's what they have to but if you're just trying to get a comparison of how the students are doing, it makes it difficult when the summative information that you're given is so different from school to school. So to me, it's like one person talks about how their mental health is and gives you numbers, and then someone else gets up and they talk about their physical health and they give you numbers, and then someone else talks about their spiritual health, but then you can't really compare because they've told you about different areas. Does that make any sense to you? It just makes it, and every year I have the same, and that's why I say, break it down and explain to me.
So there are two things. So the data that we give you, when we give you the map, so when you think back to the data that we gave you in the spring that did have the map data, that was all of that consistent data.
Right.
So that is the data that all of the plans and everything are based off of.
But they don't include that in the plan. So if you look at the plans, if you look at each school's goal, narrative, and information analysis is different. The only thing that's consistent is the demographics.
So part of that is because each school does have their own characteristics, and each school is unique in what they are bringing to the table. And so in order to do that, we don't want to be so prescriptive that each school cannot share their story of what they need to work on.
I get that, and I think they should have that opportunity. I just think it would also be helpful to have a use of consistent data from place to place to place. So if you're looking at them, you can kind of get an overall picture. Because if you're not,
so the data that the district puts together that we give you, you're asking for the data to be consistent on the front of the school improvement plan instead of the raw data that we get, that we
or in
look
addition
forward
to, it doesn't be one or the other. It's just when I'm looking at, if I'm looking at a Flossmoor Hills school improvement plan, and they'll put in their map percentages, right? Then I go to the Western Avenue school improvement plan, and they have the actual map numbers. Then you go to, say, Serena, they don't have any numbers. That's what I'm talking about. It just, can we just put them all in or something just so that we can.
So we did review the notes. So Kathy, could you please write that down? Because we did review the notes prior to putting everything together this year, and that was not in the notes from last year. So.
Oh, I know I said it, because I say it.
Mr. Frazier, you have a comment?
Yes, and maybe to that, do we have a slide with a comparison of greatest areas of need across the district in terms of each school building? And is that kind of what you're talking about as well?
Each school, as far as, we do have the greatest area of need, and when they do come to the monitoring visits 3 times a year, we do talk about the greatest area of need.
Right.
So that's something that is addressed not only here, but also the 3 times a year when they come report out to the district office cabinet. And at each building, so for example, Serena's is operations and algebraic thinking. And that is a theme in a couple of the schools, but not all of the schools.
Okay, and I guess to my point, maybe in the presentation, I think that would be very helpful to see, okay, where specifically do we have an area of need and how does that relate to?
They have.
Okay.
So that is a slide that everyone does have. A greatest area of need is in everyone's.
Yes, but do we have one slide that has all the schools together so we can look at the different schools to see?
So no, I do not have a summary because each school was just reporting out individually. So if you would like a summary, that is something we can definitely do for next year.
Okay, I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you very much. There's nothing else? No. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, so when we talk about MAP scores, and to go to Dr. List's question, and I know, John, you've probably gone through all of your kids' MAP scores, so I'm guessing you have a very good answer to the question you already asked. But because you don't know him as well and didn't guess to ask him what his answer was, I'm going to say that those RIT scores, which are those individual scores that we see when our kids take those tests, my understanding is that those are like, the target scores are based on the mean score of every kid nationwide who had a similar beginning score.
Correct.
And so that growth is figured out based on some much more complicated equation than I could ever pretend to figure out.
So it's a computer adaptive test.
What was it, John?
Quartile regression.
Quartile regression.
Yes, thank you. It is based on that. So all of the students, so because it is a computer adaptive test, the students as they're taking it, the students are programmed to get approximately 50% of those questions incorrect as they're taking that computer adaptive test. And so the kids who are within that quartile, they have and say, okay, if you have a RIT score of 229, they're saying within that, you are expected to get X amount of growth if you are in this grade level.
And that's compared nationwide.
Nationwide.
To other kids who have that starting score.
Correct.
And where they've ended.
Correct.
Up. And that's regressed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the reason we have stuck with MAP for how long?
It started in 2002 in this district.
Okay. Is that it does feed the takers progressively more challenging questions.
Correct.
So
because it is adaptive.
So it allows them to test to the ability, the outer edges of their knowledge.
Because it's a ladder, exactly. It is not grade bound. It is not a grade bound test, which is one of the reasons why we've stuck to it, is because it is a ladder and it will sit there and say, okay, I can take you outside of these bounds. It is not saying I'm only testing you within this third grade content. I am taking you and I can sit there and say, you know, we will go and we will say, you know, because of this, I am figuring out where you are and I'm not bounding you to a grade score.
So at the risk of being redundant, those RIT scores are not linked to age or grade level.
Correct.
They are linked to a prior score of a student and where.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
You probably still have a better answer than I do.
That's great, thank you. Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, roll call please, Kathy. Mrs. Linton,